Now, look, we're going to be shifting toward another book. The last few videos we did were based on my book, God's Crime Scene. But now we're going to shift and look at some work that's really more centered in my professional work as a cold case homicide detective. Remember, I did a lot of this for years, still get to consult on cold cases all the time. These are simply events in the distant past for which, we don't usually have living eyewitnesses anymore. We don't often have the documents we would like to have. We can't access those eyewitnesses. Yet these kinds of cases, and I've done a bunch of these on Dateline, these are the kinds of cases that are really trying to determine what happened in the past when you don't have access to such things. Now, as you may or may not know, my family is a law enforcement family. My son, Jimmy, who's responsible right now for about 70% of our content at coldcasechristianity.com, also works in this profession as I did before him. We all share the same name with my dad, who did this before us. And so we have been at the same agency well over 60 years doing the same kind of work. As a matter of fact, you may have seen me talk about some of the things we're going to cover in this segment are really out of a 6-minute presentation I did in God's Not Dead 2. So we're going to be talking about content from the book Cold Case Christianity. So before we get into making a case for the Christian worldview from Scripture, I want to start by talking about the nature of evidence, because this is a lot of what we're going to be covering, right? As why should we trust what the evidence says? Well, what's the nature of evidence to begin with? You folks have no hard evidence for Christianity. Really, hard evidence is not a category. There are only 2 categories of evidence. Let me illustrate them by illustrating this case. Let's say we were investigating a murder of a young lady who was killed by this boyfriend of hers. Okay, she was bludgeoned to death with the baseball bat. It was 2 ways to make a case like this. You can use indirect evidence or direct evidence. You only have 2 kinds, direct and indirect. That's it. The only 2 kinds of evidence available to us. Direct evidence is limited to eyewitness accounts, eyewitness testimony. If there's an eyewitness who can identify this young man, then we can make a case with direct evidence. Everything else is indirect, by the way. That means DNA, fingerprints, all the material evidences. Those are all indirect evidences, also known as circumstantial. That's another word for indirect. There is no third category. This is it, direct and indirect. Okay, if we had a witness like this who could say, you know what, I saw the entire thing. I know that guy. My neighbor across the street has been dating this guy for a while, and I heard on the day of the murder that she was screaming. And I look up, I see through their living room window that sure enough, he is assaulting her with a baseball bat. And I know this guy personally by name. As a matter of fact, we're so familiar that I could recognize him anywhere. He's been dating her for years. She even knows his name. Well, that's a good case. If she holds up under cross-examination, you can make this entire case with nothing more than her eyewitness account. This is what we would call direct evidence, okay? Because it's an eyewitness. But if on the day of the murder, the killer has actually disguised himself in some way, just put a mask over his head, as you see here, well, now we cannot make it by way of an eyewitness identification. We have to make it a different way. So we'll go out and start to collect circumstantial or indirect pieces of evidence, okay? And we'll knock on his door. We'll ask him, what were you doing yesterday at the time of the murder? And he gives us an alibi. I was out drinking with 2 of my friends. Well, what are your buddies' names? We go out, we interview those 2 guys, and they say, well, he's lying about that because I haven't seen this guy in weeks. Well, now you've got him lying about his alibi, and he does fit what the woman said was the general weight and size and shape and height of the boyfriend that she knew, who was always arguing with her neighbor. Well, so is that enough? Probably not. We do a search warrant at the house. We recover a bat. And that bat is very suspicious because it's all nicked and dinged up like it's been used for something other than baseballs. And sure enough, when we examine it for biological materials, it ends up having no biological evidence because it's been soaked in bleach. Okay, who bleaches their baseball bat? We also find at that search warrant that there is a pair of jeans that are dirty, but they've been spot cleaned at the thighs. Like there's something that was on the pants that this guy thought was important to spot clean to get off the pants. And there's no forced entry at the house. No one kicked the door or broke a window to get in. And that means that basically whoever got in either knew the lady, knew the victim, and of course her boyfriend would know her, or had a key to get in. And sure enough, the boyfriend did have a key to get into the house. Only 3 people had a key. And so that makes it really, really suspicious, right? No forced entry. He's got these spot clean pants. And he'll tell you in the interview that, yeah, I've got a temper and I do once in a while lose my temper. And I've punched her a couple of times, but I don't mean anything by it. And I'm always very, very repentant afterwards. I'm always sorry I did it. I always apologize to her. She always takes me back because she understands it's just my bad temper. And I will admit, on the day of the murder, I was mad at her and I yelled at her. I even threatened to kill her because I found out she was cheating on me on that day, but I did not kill her. Now, it turns out the witness says when he ran away, this guy who did the murder, when he ran away, she noticed something unusual about his boots. He had a boot with a leather band that was vertical on the outside of the boot. And you do some research, there's only like one brand of boots that matches that description. It's only sold at one place anywhere in the county. Only 30 pairs have been sold in the last 2 years. But who do you think's got one of those 30 pairs? Also, when you do the search warrant, if you'd have gotten there just a little bit later, he probably would have been dead because he was preparing to kill himself. We know that because there's a suicide letter on the counter. And in that suicide letter, he says that he did something yesterday, that was the day of the murder, for which he cannot forgive himself, something that changed his life, changed the life of the people he loves, and now he cannot go on. But because you got there a little bit too early, nowhere in the letter does he say explicitly that he killed his girlfriend. And finally, the witness says when he ran out to the car and drove away, he was in an unusual car, maybe borrowed from a friend, who knows? But it was, when described, she would say it was like an early 70s yellow Volkswagen Karmann Ghia. Well, you do a DMV search, there's not a lot of Karmann Ghias that are still even operational from that generation. But there are 3, and you don't know what color they are until you open this guy's garage and you discover he's got a 1972 yellow Volkswagen Karmann Ghia. Now, look, I think we could ask at this point, isn't it possible this guy just looks guilty when he's really innocent? Yes, that is absolutely possible. But we're not interested in possible. The standard of proof is not beyond a possible doubt because you never convict anybody. We're interested in beyond a reasonable doubt. Is this reasonable that he just happens to look this guilty? Look, defense attorneys will try to show you how there are 8 different explanations for all of these problems he has in his evidence. Some way to explain the bat, some way to explain the pants, and these are not related either to him or to this crime. But it seems to me the more reasonable explanation is that he unifies all of these pieces of evidence because he is the one singular cause that explains the evidence most succinctly, most thoroughly, and everything seems to point to him as the killer. So yes, he could be incredibly unfortunate and unlucky, or he could just be incredibly guilty. And this is what circumstantial cases look like. Indirect cases look like. And I'm here to tell you that all of my cases are entirely circumstantial. And that's the case for most cases in America. And the reason why they are circumstantial is because if you've got a case with eyewitnesses who can identify you, you're probably not going to trial. You're probably taking a plea deal. Or you were convicted years ago because you had good eyewitnesses. By the time I get a case and it's cold, it's because there were no eyewitnesses. They were lame cases to begin with. So all my cold cases are 100% indirect evidence cases. I've never lost a case because these are powerful. In the book, I've drawn it this way for you. In Cold Case Christianity, I've drawn it this way. These are what I call death by 8,000 paper cut cases. Now, I'll just be honest. I'm not going to use 8 pieces of evidence in a criminal trial. I'll probably have 80 pieces of evidence that point to him as the suspect. And I love these kinds of cases because if you think about it, between indirect or direct cases, circumstantial or direct cases, circumstantial or eyewitness cases, I love circumstantial evidence because the indirect or circumstantial evidence is not trying to lie to me. Witnesses often do. Now, look, I can misinterpret this evidence, but the boots are not trying to lie to me. They don't have that kind of, ability. Witnesses often do. So I actually love circumstantial. I also love circumstantial cases because judges instruct juries to treat circumstantial evidence with the exact same weight they treat direct evidence. This is the jury instruction in the state of California. Neither is entitled to any greater weight than the other. Now, this is important for us to do before we begin, because we're going to be making a case for the reliability of the New Testament from both direct eyewitness accounts in the Gospels and indirect evidence to support all kinds of things about what the witnesses say. So we're going to use both forms of evidence, but I just need you to see the difference and understand. Now, I will tell you, I don't trust eyewitnesses because they lie. So I never just accept what somebody says. I don't care if it would help my case or not help my case. Instead of trusting eyewitnesses, I test eyewitnesses. And that is the template we're going to use as we approach the New Testament. I just wanted to give you this first session an overview of the kinds of evidence we're going to use. And I want to show you the 4 questions. Now, look, how do I develop the questions to test an eyewitness? Well, they're in the jury instructions in the state of California. There are 13 questions that jurors can consider as they are examining the eyewitnesses on the stand. And it kind of comes down to this, these 4 large categories. And this was exactly what I looked at when I was first examining the gospel accounts. Now, to make it easier, I will give you single words, because we're going to be doing the next 4 videos based on these single words. But I wanted to show you that we're going to look at whether or not the witnesses were actually there. They were present to see what they said they saw. Can they be corroborated or verified in some way? Have they been accurate and honest over time? And finally, are they biased? Do they possess a bias that would cause them to lie? We are going to take the same template we would have put on criminal trial eyewitnesses, and we're going to apply them to the gospel authors. So this is where we're going to start in the next session. But I wanted to give you the overview of the kinds of evidence. We'll be returning to these notions about the nature of evidence at the end of our course. But I want to at least lay the foundation so you understand how we're going to build both an indirect case and a direct case for the reliability of the Gospels.